Today we're going to start Walk the World's Rim by Betty Baker. I will warn you, I will get pronunciations messed up. I'll do the best I can. So we're going to start with the preface. The years before, in the summer of 1527, 5 Spanish ships sailed from Cuba to explore Florida. The 5 Franciscan friars aboard hoped to convert the Indians to the Word of God. The rest of the 600 men dreamed of wealth. All but 4 of them found death. The tragedy was a result of poor leadership. Against the advice of the best captains, Governor Pamphilio de Narvaez led his soldiers inland, directing the ships to meet the army further north. The soldiers never saw the ship again. Beset by poisonous snakes, insects, treacherous swamps, and hostile Indians, the Spaniards struggled north and west to what is now Pensacola. There, between Indian attacks, the men slaughtered their precious horses and used the hides to build crude boats. The barges pushed off for Mexico, only to be separated by a storm at the mouth of the Mississippi River. A hurricane drove the 3 surviving barges ashore near what is now Galveston, Texas. In a futile attempt to launch one salvaged barge, the men lost all their clothing, tools, weapons, and meager supplies. Within a year, sickness, starvation, and Indians diminished the survivors to 4. Olivar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca, I believe, Alonso de Castillo Maldonado, here, I'll just pronounce these right in here. It's a little it's backwards, so hopefully y'all can read backwards, but I'll read that. Andres Dorantes and his Negro slave Esteban. Yeah. I'm horrible with Spanish, sorry. Only 4 from more than 600 men. These 4 might not have lived either if they had not assumed the roles of medicine men. By blessings and prayers, Castillo and de Vaca cured a great many Indians. Either the cures were miraculous, as the 3 Spaniards believed, or most of the illnesses were imaginary, brought on by fear of witches and spirits, so that the patients easily imagined themselves cured by the gods from the rising sun. Whatever the explanation, the more people they cured, the more closely the Spaniards were guarded. The Indians could not afford to let such valuable medicine men escape to another tribe. For 7 years, the 4 men lived among the Gulf Coast Indians, primitive people on a near-starvation diet. Then, late one summer, they escaped and fled north into the unknown, unexplored territory of Texas. Without warm robes, they could not survive the cold weather they knew was coming. So the Spaniards took refuge with the poor but friendly Avavere Indians. Chapter 1, It Goes Hungry. The wind swept southward, gathering cold and force over the Arctic wastes. It roared through the canyons of the Rocky Mountains, started the buffalo herds drifting into its icy blast, and lashed the teepees of the Cheyenne. Then its fury exhausted over the plains. The wind spent its last breath over the warm Gulf, where strange vessels sailed east and west. Familiar Indians or new-come Spaniards, teepee or caravel. It made no difference to the north wind, but to the Indian boy scuttling from the reed mat hut in the Texas hills, Each bone-chilling gust and rough splinter of sleet seemed sent by demons to plague him alone. Let's see here. Chaco, I guess that's how you pronounce it, pulled the skimpy deerskin tighter over his haunched shoulders. He lifted his head briefly to find the pair of huts set apart from the rest of the village. The bitter wind cut his squinted eyes, but the tears sprang as much from the painful hunger in his belly as from the icy air. Chaco could not remember any comfortable length of time in all his 14 years when he had not been cold and hungry, except in the summer when he was hungry and hot. The men, 4 from the sun, spoke of a new God. They healed the sick with prayers to him. Perhaps he could stop the wind from blowing and bringing food to the Avavares. Chaco would gladly dance to any god or demon who could do such things. Then, fearful that the spirit of the misfortune had read his thoughts, Chaco spat twice over his left shoulder to honor and appease the malicious god. He swept aside the stiff hide over the doorway of the hut and crawled through the low opening. 2 men crouched over the fire pit. One was weathered, as brown as Chaco, but the hair growing long and thick on his face was the color of grass when there'd been no rain for many hot suns. Chaco had seen the skin protected by that beard. It was as white as the other man's skin was black. The white man's blue eyes turned questioningly toward Chaco. The wind has blown visitors to my father's hut. Chaco's father was head man of the village. All visitors stopped there. They are ill? It was more of a statement than a question. Yes, Cabeza de Vaca. All the people have heard of your power to heal. I will go. The man closed his eyes and moved his lips silently. He touched fingertips to his forehead, chest, and each shoulder. Then he rose stiffly. Go with God, murmured the black man. Chaco waited until the door covering fell into place behind the Spaniard. Then he turned to the Negro, and spoke to in faulty Spanish. How goes it, Esteban? The big man grinned. It goes hungry, to be sure. Sit and I will give you another Spanish lesson. The words will drown the rumbling of my belly. Chaco squatted beside the meager fire and lay a package on the dirt floor. Aye, food. But Esteban's expectant grin faded as Chaco unwrapped the dirty matting, fish bones. Hush, Chaco glanced fearfully at the hut door. We're lucky to have them. I buried them long ago to keep them from being stolen. To be sure, we've already found it safer to eat meat raw. Try to cook it and someone steals it from the spit before your nose has filled with the smell. Meat, Chaco sighed at the thought of the rare food, of any food. Half of his fish bones he'd given to his parents. It was all any of them would have that day, perhaps for many days. Esteban lifted one of the 3 fish skeletons gingerly between his huge fingers. And how do we eat this magnificent banquet? We grind them between stones and lick the dust from our hands. It isn't much, but it may keep us from starving. To be sure, Esteban sighed heavily. As they ground and licked, Chaco wondered how to ask about this god to which Cabeza de Vaca, I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhat correct, and the 2 seniors in the other hut spoke. These men from the sun were so thin and so nearly naked that it hardly seemed possible their God could be any more powerful than the ones Chaco's people already feared. But perhaps this God was only a healing God, and there were others for hunting. Chaco glanced sideways at Esteban. Esteban was larger than the white men. Indeed, he was larger than any man Chaco had ever seen, but his skin hung loosely on his massive frame. Like the three seniors, Esteban never complained, but he was the only one who finished his meals with a sigh as if regretting there wasn't more. Also, he was the only one who offered friendship. He spent most of his time hunting or talking with Chaco or teaching him the Spanish tongue. But one thing Esteban disliked speaking of. This God was the three seniors. Chaco would have to save his questions until Cabeza de Vaca returned from treating the sick man in his father's hut. Meanwhile, the boys searched for a topic to lure Esteban into telling one of his fantastic stories. You, men from the sun, do not seem to mind hunger, he ventured at last. After 7 years with the Indians southward, you get used to not eating. Half those people die every year from starvation. It is the same here. The cactus fruit ripens, the fish swarm upriver, or someone kills a deer. For a short time there is enough, but then comes hunger, and what morsels you find are snatched from between your teeth. Chaco banged the last fish bone violently with the small stone. I have seen some eat the ground itself. Esteban nodded. And they died of it? You have traveled far. It is the same everywhere. Everywhere we've traveled from Florida to here. And this place to which you travel now, what about it? Ah, when you get to Mexico, it will be different. We'll receive the welcome of conquering generals. Ah, the fiestas. Ah, the fiestas with banquets twice a day. Chaco leaned forward eagerly. Banquets of what? All the fruits of the Viceroy's gardens, honey cakes that melt on your tongue, fine stews seasoned with chili peppers, Indian tortillas large as cartwheels. And meat? Interrupted Chaco. Will there be meat? To be sure, little one, there will be duck roasted on a spit, plump hens, suckling pigs oozing with fat, and a whole leg of mutton. Though Chaco had been learning the Spanish tongue through the long winter, many words such as pig and mutton held no meaning to him. From Esteban's tone, he knew they were delights beyond anything he'd ever known. What a marvelous land this Mexico must be. No wonder the seniors were so eager to return. Why had they ever left? Chaco would never leave such a place. Oh, do you know what I'll do at the banquet? He demanded Esteban. What? I'll take a tiny bit of this. His thick fingers plucked at an imaginary morsel from the air. One bite of that? Just a leg of the chicken, thank you, and but a thin slice of mutton. He waved his arm grandly. Throw the rest to the dogs. Chaco gasped. Is this how you fatten the dogs to eat them? No, little one, we don't eat dogs in our country, though we've eaten worse in yours, to be sure. No, I want the wonderful feeling of having so much food that I can throw it away. The wind shifted through the reed matting and lifted their rags as they sat thinking of the food Esteban had just imagined thrown to the dogs. Chaco could not imagine so much meat. He could not imagine what it would be like to have enough just to fill his own stomach every single day. At last, Esteban's voice broke the silence. "And after I've stuffed myself so I can barely waddle, do you know what I'll do?" "What?" "I'll go to the bullfight." Aye, what a sight that is." "What is a bull?" Esteban scratched his tightly curled hair. "Well, I suppose you could say it's a large deer, larger than 4 of your deer, with long curved horns." "Aye, the bull is fierce in anger. He paws the ground and gores right and left with the horns, like so." Esteban imitated the actions of the maddened bull. "Oh, you mean a buffalo?" Now Esteban looked puzzled. "What is a buffalo?" "An animal such as you describe. But we've seen nothing larger than a small deer. They seldom come this far south, but many seasons ago, during a dry time, 3 of them strayed down along the river. Far to the north, there were more buffalo than there are stars in the sky, or so I have heard." Aye. Esteban's eyes widened so that the whites shone brightly in the firelight. "All those cows. Why do you live here? Why don't you move north and hunt the cows? You'd have plenty of food. The buffalo are big and fierce, just as you said. We have trouble enough killing a deer. Besides, the buffalo belong to the people in the north." "To be sure, but it is a shame that all that meat walks about up north while we sit here with our stomachs hugging our backbones." Chaco glanced shyly up at the man. When we are cold and hungry like this, the old ones tell us stories so we'll forget." "And don't want to hear it again, little one." "Yes, tell me, Esteban. Tell me again how you come to be here." "But you don't understand what I speak about." "To be sure, but I like to hear." The big head tilted back to let loose a rumbling laugh. Chaco knew he had won. He clenched his knees to his chest and waited for the unbelievable tale. It was true he did not understand about ships, the islands from which they'd sailed, and where, where this Florida was in which they'd landed. Even 600 men were beyond his imagining. But the tragedy that only these 4 in his village were left was something he understood very well, just as he understood the hardship of living for 7 years as captives of the coast tribes up to the south. Those tribes came often to the cactus harvest. They were hungrier than Chaco's people and cruel beyond belief. Even the tales of the buffalo people were not as horrible as the things Chaco had seen among the coast tribes. Usually, the story of the homemade hide barges, the storms, the hostile Indians held Chaco spellbound. But this day, his thoughts kept running to what Esteban had said about the buffalo. When he returned to his father's hut, the words stung his mind as sharply as the sleet dug at his bare legs and unprotected face. Why did his people live in this harsh, thorny country when others to the north had plenty of meat? It was true that his people hadn't the weapons to hunt the buffalo, but all the tribes gathered in peace to share the cactus fruit harvest. Couldn't the Avavares have a share of the meat killed by the buffalo hunters, or learn from them how to hunt the great beasts in what gods required sacrifice? When he suggested this to his father, the head man was shocked. "This is our land, my son," he said sternly. "The buffalo belong to the tribes of the north." "But why can't we move?" insisted Chaco. "This is the land the gods gave us when the earth was new. So long as we remain on it, we are free to follow our own ways. Why then should we move? To get food. What value is food if we must obey the laws of strangers? We are our own masters, and we shall have food when the cactus fruit ripens. That was 3 round moons away. Until then, there was nothing but what they could dig from the ground with their bare fingers, and not even that if the sleet and cold wind did not stop. Chaco said nothing, but as Chubeza de Vaca prayed over the man lying on the mat in the corner, he turned Esteban's words over in his thoughts. It was true the buffalo belonged to other tribes, and perhaps they would not be friendly to the Avares, I think, especially to one 14-year-old Avari, if he should try to go by himself. But what about Mexico, the land of the 3 señors? He must question Cabeza de Vaca. But before the Spaniard finished speaking with his God, Chaco had fallen asleep. The storm raged the next day and the day after, and all that time there was no food in the village. Is it your doing? Chaco's father told him. It is your doing, Chaco's father told him. Someday you will be head man in my place. Thus your thoughts of leaving our land have doubly angered the spirit of misfortune. He opened his medicine pouch and cast the bones, singing softly over them. Fearfully, Chaco spat twice over his left shoulder and resolved to put all thoughts of strange gods and lands from his mind. He succeeded during the days, but his nights were haunted by dreams of Esteban, looking much like a buffalo with his dark skin and tightly curled hair, throwing baskets of food to a pack of round-bellied dogs. No longer did he enjoy Esteban's company. The things he wished most to hear he could no longer speak of. Each time one of the señors came to share the fire, Chaco was forced to leave. It was the only way to keep the burning questions from passing his lips. If he spoke or questioned, he might bring disaster to his people from the evil spirit of misfortune. But knowing all he did now, how long could he keep silent? The moon grew fat and was again eaten by demons. The cactus flowered and the fruit formed. The señors spoke of leaving soon, and that night Chaco was not troubled by the dreams. He did not sleep at all. At the end of the long, cold night, he had reached a decision. When the dawn broke, he spat twice over his left shoulder and crept from the hut.